All right, we're back with a new episode here of Wooden Sticks. We are broadcasting from the Aquarius Home Services studio. My name is Kevin Gork. Thank you again for taking the time to listen in as we migrate our way through another great hockey season here locally. The Minnesota Wild are dealing with the multitude of injuries, but they are at least holding their position. And as we record this here midweek, they've got a showdown with the Florida Panthers, and then a weekend pair of games Friday at home against Utah, which I think this is when the show comes out, and then Saturday, second of back-to-back at Winnipeg. And there's a handful of guys that are out right now, but really like the way they're playing. Even that loss to Vegas this past weekend was one of the better games of the season, just in effort, in what you're getting from a hockey club that's put themselves in that top five conversation. They look legit, and good to see Jesper Wallstedt get a start in goal. It had been kind of an up and down season for him in Iowa with the Wild, but he looked great. After he got through the first 10 minutes, kind of settled in and gave the team a chance to win when it counted. They had a couple of great looks late. Matt Boldy specific with the goal he pulled, had a really good look, and then the puck kind of banked off the back dasher, and there was a weak side chance for a goal, but Peter Angelo was able to slide over the defenseman and block that would-be shot from going in. So, no, a lot of positives right now with the Wild, and you're getting to see some of the depth of the organization. The players they're calling up from Iowa, there hasn't been a great deal of drop-off. That fourth line has actually held its own, and Kuznetsov has been anchoring that line with a couple of the call-ups. And I like the way John Hines is working Boldy and Kaprizov in as guys that can double shift. They went 11-7 over the weekend, and so I think, if they could just stay steady here and even play 500 hockey until maybe the early part of January when they figure to get Middleton, Eck specifically back. We don't know with Gustafsson what it is right now. As I record this midweek, we're still waiting to hear a little more of a definitive answer, but I think this week it's going to be both Fleury and Wallstedt that end up playing, and hopefully Gus can get back soon. So that's the update on the Minnesota Wild. We're gonna have a great time today talking Miracle on Ice and Golden Gopher hockey, and maybe sprinkle a little Grand Rapids hockey into with Bill Baker. And I've had the pleasure and the honor of getting to know a lot of the guys from that team in 1980, and I've worked at charity events and different venues, and had a chance to moderate different hockey conversations. And Bill Baker, our guest today, is, first of all, he's an absolute gentleman, but he's also one of the all-time great players in the history of Minnesota high school and college hockey. And he didn't end up on that 1980 team by accident. He was a fixture. He was a big-time player, a defenseman who had size. And back then, if you were 6 feet something, you were one of the biggest players on the ice, and he was mobile, and he could move the puck. He could shoot the puck, played a ton of minutes. And he was a part of the Halloween machine, as it were. And being that I kind of grew up on the 70s and 80s and watching high school hockey, the orange and black of Grand Rapids, when they came to St. Paul for the state tournament, it was a really big deal. And they did so year after year after year, it felt like, in my childhood. But he was a part of the first team to do that. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what that experience was like back in 1972. I think he was a ninth grader at that time. He would end up winning a state championship in 75 before winning 2 national championships at the U of M. Played for Herb Brooks, both in college and on the Olympic team. So there's going to be all kinds of good stories there. In the National Hockey League, played for the Rangers. He played for Montreal, who drafted him. Also spent some time with the Colorado Rockies. So lots of fun today talking to one of the all-time greats in terms of Minnesota hockey, Mr. Bill Baker. So that'll be our featured guest, and really looking forward to that conversation. What I need you to be aware of here at the holiday season is, first of all, our great sponsors. And I'll start with John Schweitz, my good friend from the University of St. Thomas, one of my classmates, and a guy I still spend a lot of time with. He is a big part of the show because the Minnesota Masonic Charities are one of our lead sponsors, and they're so involved in our community. They've got the Cancer Center here at the U of M. They've got the Children's Hospital and the Masonic Home over in Bloomington. They're just a few examples of the important work that Freemasons support right here in your community. They're the largest fraternal organization in the world, and they have consistently answered that call when it comes to charitable needs. And especially here as we approach the holiday season, just think about the value of what they bring to our community. So thank you to John Schweitz and Minnesota Masonic Charities. And I got to thank one of the guys behind the scenes, Andrew Height, in charge of our advertising. If you want to be a part of the show, and we'd love to have you, all you got to do is email him, AHEYDT, aheight@talknorth.com if you want to be involved. One of our most recent additions to all of our shows here on the Talk North Network is OnX Hunt, and here's more about them.
We've told you about OnX Hunt. Now let me tell you about OnX Fish. Ice fishing is here, and it's time to hit the frozen water with OnX Fish. The Fish app is the most comprehensive fishing tool for increasing your confidence on ice. Use OnX Fish to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potentials. OnX Fish also shows you hot spots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
We're back on Wooden Sticks, recording as always from the Aquarius Home Services studio. So excited to have one of my hockey heroes with us today, Mr. Bill Baker from Grand Rapids. Bill, thank you for being a part of the show.
My pleasure, Kevin.
You know, I did a deep dive here in the last couple of days, and I knew a lot of the big moments, and you had so many in your hockey career. But the very first team to go to the state tournament from Grand Rapids was your team back in 1972. And I just remember growing up in the 70s and 80s, the Halloween machine being basically a regular fixture at the tournament. But you were the first team that broke through. That had to be extra exciting in a hockey crazy community like that.
Yeah, it really was. In '72, I was a freshman, and we went. I didn't play. Well, I played about half the games during the year, but then we went again in '74, and then '75 we won it. And then they went on a long run. I think they went almost like maybe 9 or 10 years in a row where they went to the state tournament, and it was just amazing. But we got credit. The guys from '75 get a lot of the credit for starting this whole thing, and we're having our 50th reunion here coming up in February. But we've been talking about it, and it's really the guys that are ahead of us. The ones the guys are on the '72 team that really did. They started it. They had success at the youth level and up and then into high school, and we just couldn't beat International Falls that year, so we ended up runner-up in the state. But yeah, those guys are kind of the ones we all looked up to and really got our program going in Grand Rapids. And then they went on a long run, and after in '75, after winning it, like I said, they had a real long run.
I don't have a lot in common with you. You did so much more in hockey, but we're having our 40th anniversary this year of our '85 championship, and it's the same thing. We look back at the guys that broke through in 1983 that were the first guys from Burnsville to get to the tournament, and I remember vividly, those were friends of mine. I was a sophomore, they were older, and
Yep.
What a big deal it was to be at the tournament watching your high school. Like, that was a huge moment in time, and so you got a chance to be a part of the first, you got a chance to be a part of that championship team, and now you have a chance 50 years later to celebrate. What I can't believe is how fast 40 and 50 years goes by.
No, isn't that the truth? I mean, it's just crazy.
Oh.
It doesn't seem that long ago. But yeah, it was huge in Grand Rapids at the time, like you said before. It was such a hockey crazed town. It had really gone that way, but we hadn't broken through. And Coleraine and Greenway had a lot of success with their Mike Antonovich led teams and all those guys, and we watched them, and they're only 6 miles away, and it's like, why can't we do that? We couldn't break through, and there were so many good teams on the Iron Range back then, and we finally were able to do it. So it was big.
Who was the person that drew you to the game of hockey, that got you to even start down that path as a real little guy?
I don't know. It just kind of seemed like everybody did it, and we just kind of were down at the rink. Even when you were really young, you were down there, but it's the same thing playing baseball or football. And back then, you got your group of kids in the neighborhood, you're on your bikes in the summertime, and in the winter, we went down to the rink, and just kind of, it wasn't super organized at first. I think we played inside one time a week. The rest of it was all at the outdoor ice, and we had our local different geographical parts of town, that had teams and their own little rink. But so I don't think there was any one person. I know my dad was a huge hockey fan, loved the game, never played it, but it would never really pushed me or anything into it. But I knew that it was important to him.
And what was it like in all your trips to the state tournament for the town? I think of small town Minnesota, the town shutting down and everybody going to the tournament. Is that fiction or is that actually closer to the truth?
I think there's a lot of truth to that. Grand Rapids at the time was like 7,000, so obviously not everybody went, but a large percentage of them went. And it was huge. I mean, if they weren't there, they were certainly glued to their TV sets because it was big. Back then, I mean, in the 70s on the Iron Range, all of our games they were an event. I mean, it was crazy. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
The pep band playing, the place was jammed. I mean, when we played Greenway or Virginia or Hibbing and some of those teams, Evelyn, then there'd be 4 people deep instead of only 2. I mean, it was like around the rink, and it was the old chicken wire. I mean, it was just crazy.
Yes.
So it was just really a fun atmosphere.
Yeah, and I think kids forget now because it's a different world now. If you watch regular season high school hockey, they don't have the crowds like we had in the 70s and 80s, and there are a lot of reasons for that. And I'm not going to get into all that, but what I vividly remember is the fire marshal outside a lot of our games counting heads. So there wasn't a number of people in the arena where they were blocking the exits, and that was a legitimate thing in our era. And it's fascinating to look back at how lucky we were to play in that time frame because high school hockey was an event, and everybody knew the schedule, and every game was a big deal. And I think we were very blessed to have that opportunity.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, I don't know. I think the fire marshal looked the other way up in Grand Rapids around the Iron Range because, man, there was some times where it was just there's no way that we were compliant. But it was so much fun. It was just I always said, when we went over to play in Greenway, it was funny. We'd have to go dressed halfway through because we couldn't go, and they do the same thing when they came to Rapids. We couldn't go there like normally. You'd go and you'd watch the B game or the junior varsity game. And you'd sit out in the crowd. We couldn't do that there. We had to get dressed at our own rink and come over about halfway. And I said, if we say to the young guys, if you make it to the locker room, you're going to be okay. That's the safest spot in this place. But you got to get there first.
And it was wall-to-wall people, and it was a hostile environment because you're on the road. So I can only imagine. And there have been stories, and I'm dear friends with the Jetland family and the Petermeyer family from Grand Rapids about a bridge that connects or is in between Greenway and Grand Rapids. And that rivalry, the more I hear about it from them, the more I believe it's real. Like that was a big deal.
Oh, it was huge. It was just huge. And, it was like, because it was so close, and then,
right.
Like the paper mill, about half of the guys at the mill were, Greenway guys, and there were Grand Rapids guys, and so there would be that. And I mean, it was the whole the towns against each other. The competition, and it was really fun. But it was really something. And I know both of the families you're talking about, very quality people.
Good folks for sure, and I love the
No doubt.
the stories. And we were up there a little over a decade ago for Hockey Day Minnesota, and that's a day when you celebrate the game, but you also celebrate the community that's hosting. And I got to tell you, I've never spent a bad minute in Grand Rapids. I played up there a bunch as a kid in some youth hockey tournaments as a squirt, peewee, and bantam. Gone back there to watch the high school teams play, and then for Hockey Day Minnesota. I mean, Grand Rapids crushed it on that particular day, outdoors on Pokegama. It was just one of those magical days. Yeah,
it was. When I dropped the puck that day, and it was like
I remember
how cold it was. I remember going back. The girls' game was last that night. I thought, oh my gosh, I think I got to go back. I just have to go back, and watch. And it was so cold and windy, and I just felt terrible for those poor kids out there. But they didn't care. They were just having fun. And man, I stood right next to a heater. I know that.
It was bad. The weather was cold. It was windy. But it really was spectacular fun. And so you were obviously a star player throughout your high school career, and we know you go on to play for Minnesota for the Golden Gophers. Were there a lot of schools, I assume, that would love to have Bill Baker on their college roster? And how and why did you end up choosing Minnesota?
Well, there was, Gorgie. It was I was getting letters from everybody, phone calls, the whole bit. What was nice was, when you're playing in a place where you got a lot of good players, and we had John Rothstein, who was my teammate and good friend, tremendous high school player. I mean, it was great. We got scouts every night watching him everywhere we go. And so it's like,
Oh,
and then all of a sudden, maybe that Baker kid that's feeding him the puck up there, maybe we'd like him. The next thing I got letters coming from all over, and it was perfect. It was just perfect for me. And but in the end, I mean, I went as a junior. I think it was. I think it was when we were down at the state tournament. I think we went and watched the Gophers play somebody, and I was just in awe. I went there to the old Williams Arena. It smelled like hockey, old place, and I'm watching
yes.
these guys going, "Oh my God, I think I could even play here." I'm like, really? And when, so I mean, I would go home. I'll never forget when I'd go home as a senior, you're getting letters from all over the place, which was really nice. And I was very appreciative, but I would rifle through them, and I wanted that one with that big embossed gold M on it. Herb never called. Herb never, but he sent a letter, he'll send a letter like every once in a while. And when he said, I'm going to recruit, he said, if Baker doesn't come to the U through Sid. He went, Kassan and said, if Baker doesn't come to the U, I'm not going to recruit another defenseman, because we already had 7 or 8 on scholarship. And
Oh.
I mean, that's all he had to say. It was over. It was over.
And so, I knew Herbie over the years because he did his hockey school in Faribault, and my dad was the golf pro at the country club, and they would kind of go back and forth. He'd bring the coaches over to golf. I got to go to the hockey school. He was never a warm and fuzzy guy, and you just kind of
No.
made reference to that, and we've all seen the movie Miracle. So you get there day one. Does it get warm and fuzzy at any point early on, or is it always just the assistant coaches will deal with the young defenseman from Grand Rapids, and I'll figure it out when he gets here and he's ready to go?
Yep, exactly. He never, I don't think I talked to him until I was a junior. I'm not sure about that, but I think, and then I kind of one of the more of the leaders. I actually, well, with her, a conversation implies there's a dialogue between two people, and that never happened. It was always a one-sided, him telling you what's going on. There was not a
Right.
conversation, but it was, yeah. So, there was no soft and fuzzy at all. And even with the Olympic team, those guys, they got such a big kick out of Herb, and we're just like, the guys from Minnesota, we're rolling our eyes because we've seen all this before, But those guys are talking about, how to BU with Jack Parker, and they're talking strategy on Thursday before the series and what they're going to do and where they're going to go and what they're going to do with this guy. You kidding me? All we wanted to make sure our name was on the lineup card, and
Because you never knew,
that's
right,
the
with
way Herb
him?
was.
Yeah.
But he never, ever, he didn't want your opinion. He was always, he always had enough of his own.
Well, and clearly it worked. That's the funny thing. There are so many different ways to coach, and I think a lot of times hockey parents and hockey fans think they've all got to be cookie cutter. But clearly, Herbie, there was a method to the madness. 2 national championships in your time at the U of M in 76 and 79. And I'm certain he had to have the right guys with him, because of, as you mentioned, it was a one-way street as far as communication went with the head coach, but he always seemed to have
Oh,
the right mix with assistant coaches because, to the records, it certainly worked.
yeah, no question. I mean, he, if you weren't thick-skinned enough, I think, Herb did his homework on guys. I swear he did. And, and maybe he got lucky, maybe, with the guys that he picked for the Olympic team, maybe he got lucky at Minnesota, but you don't keep getting lucky like that, He
Right.
knew he had a method to his madness, no doubt, and he knew what he wanted. He knew how he wanted to build teams. He was just kind of ahead of his time that way, I think. His methods sometimes maybe would fall into question. He was. Well, I have to go back and say that everybody. One of the big questions they asked me in Miracle is, was he that bad? Did he skate you like that after that game in Norway? And I'm like, you kidding me? So the movie's kind to him. That was nothing compared to what he did at Minnesota. I mean, it was. It could be crazy. We'd have an hour and a half, 2-hour practice without pucks. Just skate. But
Oh,
nobody ever came into Williams Arena and outskated us in the third period. We were in great shape when it came to that. We joke. Phil Vercola was my roommate. We joke all the time about getting out of shape on the weekend. It'd be like training camp every Monday. It's like, geez, because we play games, you get out of shape.
it was a different era, and I do vividly remember some of those no puck practices, and just as a player, psychologically, how hard that was. Like, you get out there, and I remember even in my days a little later, playing for Terry Skripek at St. Thomas, and you knew if you had a bad series on the weekend that Monday was going to be extra miserable. And there was certainly a psychology to it, but you're right about the legs.
Yeah.
Our teams, and I'm certain your teams, they just never got out skated when it counted.
No. And what's funny though too is Herb was, and I don't know, he's a psychology major, whatever, and he did this kind of stuff, but he always had you on your toes. You never knew what he was going to do. And you said, and that clicked in when you said that about having a bad weekend. He knew Monday was going to be terrible. That's what we would expect. I remember the one time I don't remember where we were, and we get swept, or we sweep somebody, and we go back. And back then you could practice on Sunday. We come back on Sunday morning, get your stuff on. We go out, and we had an hour, no pucks, just skate, skate, skate. And then the next time, and there was the next weekend we'd gone out, and we get swept. We're thinking, oh boy, here we go, and all of a sudden there's pizza back at the hotel, and it's like, and no skate on Monday, and it's just like, so you never knew, so you never could really, you had to really pick your spots if you're going to go out or whatever and stuff, and boy, you had to really be careful because you never knew when he could, catch wind of something, and he could change direction in a hurry. But I do have to say that with his method and that, for me, that he showed me that I could do more than I ever thought.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a clue that I was capable of that.
It's amazing. It is. And
he would just, he brings you down to the U. You're just a young 18-year-old kid, and you don't really, I'd never been worked on the rink like that before. I mean, I just, and boy, I'd heard rumors about it when from the guys that were there when I was being recruited on there, and you heard when you talk to some of the players. But boy, I tell you, I have nothing but respect for what he did for me, and give you a chance to win 2 NCAAs, be an All-American at Minnesota. That was huge for me, and win a gold medal in 1980. And I mean, my goodness, just have nothing but praise.
Well, and it's funny because, the movie talks in great detail about how Herbie had a distinct idea of the type of players he wanted. The line in the movie was, we're not looking for the best players, we're looking for the right players. I have to assume, though, Bill, that after winning a couple of national championships, being an All-American, and I remember those days, I remember how well you were thought of. I'm not saying you assumed a spot on the 1980 team before the Olympic tryouts, but you had to have a pretty good idea that you were going to be a part of that team.
Well, you thought your chances were good, but the way Herb was, and I'm going to tell you a story here because I've always got a story. That's the thing, but it's like I've got a million Herbie stories. But so I'm done with my eligibility, right? I'm going, and I apply, I get into dental school at Minnesota. They won't give me any kind of a deferral. So I go and I set up a meeting to talk to Herb. And I'll never forget. So it's like whatever, 9 o'clock the next morning or whatever. So I knock on the door. He opens up the door and sit down. All right, so sit down. And I start telling him. I said, well, I'm got accepted to dental school. I've been hearing, some of the guys that been not guaranteed spots, but have a pretty good chance. Can you give me any kind of an idea so I can? So I could, they're more than to go to dental school or try to play on the Olympic team. He doesn't say a word. He gets up out of his desk. He opens up the door, like to usher me out, and out I go. I'm like, I was just like, yeah, I did. He didn't say boo. And I'm just like, oh boy,
Oh, come on.
Yeah, honestly.
So honestly, there was nothing.
Nothing. I was like, now what? I wish I wouldn't have come in there. But,
exactly.
Yeah,
it ended up being a horrible deal because now you feel even less sure that you have any idea. Oh, God.
Well, yeah, I'd heard, Kenny Morrow and, for me, it was the defenseman I'm looking at, right? So Kenny Morrow and Jack O'Callahan, and that they were going to try to, they had some, some kind of inkling that they were going to make it, or that they'd given them, but I can't, after knowing Herb, I really don't, but I heard it too many times, I guess. But I don't. That wasn't Herb. I don't think he would do that, but maybe, And if he,
Right.
yeah, maybe he did.
Well, and it's funny because I've had a chance now in the years since that to work numerous events with a lot of the players from your 80 team. And it's amazing to me how well you guys get along. The camaraderie, the chemistry it's real. It's not fake. It's like buddies, almost brothers, like getting
Yep.
together. And I have to believe
Yeah.
that the only thing you guys had in common was you played for Herbie and he kept you guessing and he probably pissed you off more often than not. And you guys were all-star players, so you were kind of used to growing up, getting whatever you wanted. And all of a sudden now you're playing for Herb Brooks and, it puts you in a whole different mindset. But you guys genuinely, when I get together with all the players, I sense that closeness in all of you.
Yeah, no doubt. And I've said it numerous times publicly, and it's probably easy for people to say, oh yeah, when you win a gold medal, you can say that. But for me, it whether we would have won or lost, that team there was something special about it because it's here. You got 25 college players going around the country. Nobody's making any money, and you don't have college. I mean, talk about a perfect recipe for guys to get to really bond. I mean, you got to figure out how you're going to have fun, what you're going to do, where you're going to go. Plus a lot of us we knew each other already from being at the U. A lot of us were together for a different number of years there, but still the other guys to come together and to be part of it. It was really it was just a fun team. Just a good. It's just a like I said, you've been around them enough, and we were at that deal for Pav and that. It's fun. Yeah, we get along great. And when we get back together, it's like nothing's changed. We're still ripping on each other and like we're in the locker room. And that's the part I miss is being able to do that.
Yeah, it comes clear. Like the event you just referenced here at the end of summer for Pav and the jabs back and forth, friendly jabs, but funny jabs. And then just hearing all of you guys converse about Herbie and that time and just the way you guys were able to connect as a team, it's obvious. And you guys were awesome players, but I look back at your road to get, to the Olympics. And I want to take you back to that game at Madison Square Garden because the movie touches on it. And I always think about it. We all knew how good the Russians were. We're watching them bury NHL teams on a regular basis. And I'm talking NHL all-star teams. So you get beat 10-3 there. It wasn't a surprise to any of us as hockey fans. Even young hockey fans were like, yeah, they're the Russians. That's what they do. For you guys, though, I'm certain you had a lot of confidence and you knew you guys were playing at a high level, this whole lead up to the Olympics, but that had to be a really tough experience on your psyche that close to the Olympics to get beat that badly.
Yeah. And I don't even know where that came from. I don't remember that game being on our schedule because if it was, we would all have been just really pointing towards it. And all of a sudden we're going to play the Russians right before the Olympics. I'm like, what? Where did that come from? Their Red Army team. I mean, really? I don't know how they even got on the schedule and in Madison Square Garden. But anyway, so for the first step, going back, yeah, we were wondering, what's going on. I mean, how, but anyway, because we'd watched them too, I mean, and we're just like, wow, I'm going to be on the same ice sheet with those guys. Because I'd watched them the year before in '79 in Moscow, they just ran through that tournament, the world tournament. And I remember saying to somebody next to me, I doubt anybody's going to beat these guys for a number of years because they were so good. I mean, they just were like a machine,
They really were.
And so we fly to New York. The first thing was Madison Square Garden. I mean, the big tallest building in Grand Rapids had 2 stories, and here we are. We're going to play on like the 5th floor, whatever it is,
Yep.
And I'm like, what? And I'm like, wow, that's kind of a weird rink. But anyhow, you're looking there, but then you're going to get on the ice with the Russians. And honestly, Kevin, I've never seen anything quite like it. They came out to warm up and all of our guys, just about to a man, were standing there literally watching them warm up. I mean, we couldn't, there's Harlamov, and there's, Fedosov and there's, all these guys. I mean, wow, and we stood around for 3 periods. We didn't have any, we were just in awe. It was crazy, but that's probably the best thing that could have happened because then when we played them in Lake Placid, I mean, we knew what we were up against, and that it could have happened in Lake Placid very easily.
And on the other side of it, they probably because of that game thought, well, this is just going to be an easy, quick little mop up
Sure.
of the U.S. We just put 10 on them. Why won't we do it again? Right. And so the psychology of that is fascinating. And I wonder how late that game was scheduled, but it clearly played a role. So now I spent the morning rewatching part of the game against Sweden, and I think a lot of people forget. I think a lot. Well, actually, I shouldn't say forget, but I think can overlook the fact that if you guys don't at least get a tie in that game against Sweden, you might not make the medal round, and you're a huge part of it. I don't know how much of the movie was fabricated, but it made it feel like it was a weird move to have you out there. I don't look at it that way, but bottom line is you make an incredible play. As Sweden tries to clear the puck, your guys are able to hold it on the half wall. You sneak down the slot, and the puck comes to you, and you blast one middle of the slot that ties the game with the goalie pulled in the closing seconds. And that might be, up until Eruzioni's goal, the biggest goal of the tournament.
Well, it was definitely a big one. Yeah, and I was a little bit taken back when in the movie when they say like you're not supposed to be like, why is Baker out there, but no, Herb wanted us out there, but Rammer and I, we laughed because it was Rammer and I back on the point, and we're like, if Herb was really trying to score on that, how about like Mark Johnson, Davey Christian, or somebody
Take
else,
back,
do something different. But so the puck comes back, we laugh. The puck comes back to Rammer on the draw, and he drills it into some guy's shin pads, and he slides it over to me, and I'm like, I don't want it, and I just throw it around the boards.
Throw it behind.
Yep. And it goes around, and Pav, of course, makes a nice play and just chips it out there. I was heading to the net. I rung it around the boards, and I was just going to the net because I knew that it was going to get there eventually, and so that was our only hope. So I was going to head towards the net, and Pav just chipped it out there, and it came out nice and flat, and I just was able to one-time it, so it was just perfect.
Yeah, you got a lot on that shot. I watched it back a handful of times this morning, and you caught it perfect. And so that's the tie that sets the whole thing up. And I think for all of us as hockey fans, we knew the Czechs were really good. And I think everybody's eyes were opened when you guys in game 2 beat them, and not only beat them, but you beat them 7-3. I think for hockey fans, I'm not sure what it meant in the locker room for you guys as players, but that opened an awful lot of eyes around here.
Yeah, it was a big surprise. I mean, because like I said, we'd watched them play the Russians the year before, most of us, and we knew they were a good team. And all of a sudden it was kind of weird. It's like, hey, maybe we got more confidence than we think, and we can do this. We could maybe get into the medal round, because that was kind of our goal. Our goal wasn't, well, I don't know what other people's goal, but I think our goal at the time was just to try to upset somebody along the way, get into the medal round, and we always said a bronze would be amazing,
Huge. Yes.
And would have been huge because everybody had kind of already given the gold to the Russians and the silver to the Czechs.
Yeah, and that win, I think, set things up, and then the momentum just carried through with convincing wins against Norway and Romania, and then a really sneaky good West German team you guys beat 4-2. As this whole thing is going on, I've been, because of 1980, I took a trip to Lake Placid just to see it with my own eyes. And Billy, I got to tell you, I was shocked at how small that town is. And I can't even imagine hosting a whole, like a hockey tournament all by itself. I can't imagine, but the Winter Olympics in that area, I don't know how you guys did it, how you got in and out of there, how you navigated that town. But I'm guessing as you guys became rock stars throughout this 2-week process, navigating around town had to be awfully interesting.
Well, you'd think so. You'd think you'd be rock stars. But after we won, I'll never forget it because Herb says, okay, we're going, he clinks his glass. We're having we had a dinner out at a place out by Saranac Lake, not too far out of Lake Placid. And all our parents were there and everything. And we have a dinner, and he clanks his glass. He goes, okay, gentlemen, we're going to the White House in the morning, so I want you all to get back to the village and get some sleep. He doesn't get it out of his mouth. Phew, we're in cabs going downtown, right? We're downtown Lake Placid, and we're walking around and with that crazy blue velour sweatsuit that we all had, walking right side by side, and people are coming by. Hey, did you hear the hockey team won? They have no clue who we are.
Oh God, he kept it. He was able to somehow, some way insulate you guys. which is
well,
crazy. Just
yeah. I mean, we didn't
insane.
talk. He didn't let us talk to the press. I didn't let us talk to the press really. We didn't. There's no cell phones and that. But it was such a neat experience just because of what you said. It's such a small town, and we go back there now. We have that fantasy camp, and people just can't believe it. The same thing. It's like, wow. Well, I remember I watched Hayden win 3 of his 5 gold medals right there. The speed skating oval right there on Main Street, right by the hockey rink. You could walk to the ski jumping. It's a little walk, but you could
Yes.
walk out there. I mean, it was good.
Oh God. But so let's go back to game day, February the 22nd. It's the morning of the game against the Russians. And I don't know what a typical game day is like at the Olympics, but did Herbie get you guys up early? Was there like a team breakfast or a team meeting? I know the game was an afternoon game, right? Late afternoon game. So what was the early part of the day like for all you guys as players?
It's so funny. There's a lot of things. I wish I could go back and take some notes because like that, I don't really remember, Kevin, to be honest with you. I would assume that because we didn't have any team, we didn't have any team meals. We would just eat at the village. So I'm
Right.
assuming we might have had some kind of a meeting or something like late morning. I don't think we had a skate that day, but I really don't remember. I remember being pretty nervous because of what happened in Madison Square Garden. So I do
For
remember being
sure.
pretty nervous coming out on, for the rink for that.
Well, there are so many moments in the movie that bring goosebumps. One of them for me is obviously the speech that Herbie gives, and then more importantly, when you guys line up to go on the ice and the telegrams. This is far for all the young people that listen to our show here. This is long before Twitter and Facebook and all the Instagrams. This is how you communicated, and all the telegrams from all around the country supporting your team, and how you guys would come out of the locker room and touch those and then line up and go on the ice. I hope to God, as I ask you this question, that was fairly realistic.
Yeah, they would post telegrams and that. Yeah. Yeah. But
Oh,
that was the
cool.
other thing. Yeah. That was kind of the other thing though about Lake Placid. And because of the time, there wasn't social media back then. So, we didn't, I didn't, I mean, you knew it was big. I mean, the hockey world was watching you, but you didn't realize that the country was watching you. And it's probably a good
Right.
thing, knowing us, I mean, it's probably the best thing. We really didn't know. You're kind of shut in, I guess I wasn't watching the news. I wasn't really reading the paper. You could call people, I don't think I called anybody for them. My parents were out there, and my sisters were all back in Grand Rapids and that. So it's like, we really didn't know, but we found out in a hurry afterwards, that
Sure.
how big it was. And here
It
we are,
was. And
now. Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of people, I don't think I'm unique, the greatest sporting event of our lives. Like for me, and I've been watching sports since I was a little kid. I'm almost 60 now. It's the greatest sporting event of my lifetime. And what I remember vividly watching all the games, and I did not miss a game, is the USA chants. It started as kind of, okay, it's there, it's in the background. And then as the tournament wore on, and specifically West Germany game, and then into the game against the Russians, and obviously the final game on the 24th, when you wrapped up gold against Finland, it was reverberating and it was louder and it was distinct. And I have to imagine the home ice advantage and the emotion that brought to you as a young team, as college kids. Billy, how much of a factor was that?
Oh, I think it was huge. Yeah. I mean, the whole place was going nuts, all the time. It was really quite an atmosphere. But yeah, but you could tell that when they were chanting USA. I mean, it wasn't just a chant. It was heartfelt. They were
Yes.
chanting it and they meant it.
I got it. And again, we'll get to the final game against the Finns, but in between that, I want to take you back to that final 10 minutes. I think whenever you have a lead in a hockey game, you're counting minutes down. And I've heard so many players talk about this. I'm not sure I've ever had you answer the question, but for you, because you're out there and you're playing big minutes and you're involved in the
Yep.
emotion of the game, do you look at the clock or you just keep playing your game, or how much do you think about it? Because you're on the precipice of an unbelievable upset. You know that much. And that 10 minutes for all of us as fans felt like forever.
Yeah, I agree. It's so funny when Phil and Rammer and I are fishing, and you kind of it's a lull in the action, which is a lot of times for us. And you're sitting there and we're talking about stuff, and we go back to, and they remember things a little differently. I said, for me, that last 10 minutes of the Russian game after Rizzo scored, and I was on the ice for that goal. That's one of my favorite pictures. Is when he scores, I'm coming by the net, and after that, it's all kind of a blur because it was like the wheels started coming off because they started picking it up. It seemed like, to me.
Yep.
And it seemed like we could barely get the puck out, and it was coming back in, and we're going back out. So in answer to your question, I wasn't thinking about watching the clock. I was just shift after shift because that's the way we basically played 4D just about the entire Olympics. Callahan got hurt. Bobby Suter just come back from an injury, and so it was the four of us just playing. So we're going every other shift. You're just trying to go out, get in, 30, 40 seconds, get off, boom. If we can get the puck out, get off, and then, get ready to go again.
Oh, I mean, and obviously the celebration it's iconic and it's filled with so many emotions. And, letdowns are a big part of sports at all levels. Anytime a player or a team reaches a peak moment, that next time out, it's trouble. Like, it is big time trouble. I can't imagine having to come back in 2 days and play a really good Finland team. How tough a task that was for your group, and down 2-1, I believe, going to the third, and take it to your effing grave. I remember part of that being discussed in the movie. Yep. But as kids,
like
how
he needed
hard
to
was
say
it for
that?
you guys? But yeah, I think again, Herb-like, not very subtle. But how hard was it for you guys to get back up for that game, knowing what was at stake?
Well, I remember because that was like an 11 o'clock game, I think, in the morning, and it was, it's not like, what I don't remember, guys said we had a kind of a hard practice on Saturday right before. Herb, instead of a light skate, Herb kind of ran us through a decent practice, and just to kind of keep your mind off it, I guess. But it didn't say much. And of course, since after we beat the Russians, it was automatic. It's like, boy, now we have to beat Finland. If we don't, boy, can you imagine? I mean, you were nervous in the locker room. And then when he comes in and says, you'll take it to your effing grave. I mean, like he needed to say that, like we all hadn't thought about that for the last 48 hours, Herb, come on, I mean, it was like, oh my God, when he said that, it was just like, all right, let's go do this. So we take off and we get out there and we just, like every game except for Romania, we get down 1-0. And it's like, oh boy, we can't keep doing this. I remember looking down, everybody's looking up and down the bench. All right, who's going to do it today? Because man, here we go, So, but that was just kind of the fun part about that team. The guys who just keep working and going and sticking to the system, and it all worked out.
It did all work out. And I don't know how much you remember, but in the locker room, taking off your gear after the Finland game, do you remember what you guys did and said? How did you celebrate it? Like you said, it's a unique start time. It's a late morning start. Did it hit you then, the gravity of what you had done, or was it still later than that?
Oh, I don't think it really sunk in for a long time after, really, what actually happened. Yeah. And I think we had Mondale and Amy Carter came into the locker room, if I remember right. And Rizzo had like a call from like Jim Lampley or was it with Jim Lampley or something? And anyway, I don't remember. It was kind of crazy, but it wasn't, I don't think it had really sunk in. We're all just kind of celebrating. It's like, hey, but it didn't seem like you would expect, but it was obviously we were, having a good time and everything else, but just having just won a gold medal, maybe you'd expect a little more.
And then the other goosebump moment in the movie for me, and I watched it in real life as well, was the medal ceremony when all of you try to hop up on that podium. That to me is as fitting as it gets, knowing now, years later, just how tight you guys were as a group. And what a great actual team you were. That to me is one of the great moments in Olympic history.
Yeah, no question. I mean, if I could go back, they always say, if I could go back for 15 minutes to Lake Placid in 1980, I would agree. I would want to go back. That would be part of my 15 minutes. Go back for the medal ceremony, because that was pretty cool,
It was
and
awesome.
Then we get our medals, we get up on the stand, and then we go around. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the place.
No way. There's no way you
Yeah, it was
could. I
crazy.
mean, it's an incredible
It was
moment. It
crazy.
really is.
Yeah,
So I'm a
yeah,
big
it was
movie guy,
crazy.
and when I heard that they were making the movie, I part of me cringed because of that TV movie with Carl Malden, and
Yeah,
just no offense, but that just didn't capture
yeah,
my emotions. So at the time the movie came out, I'm coaching a women's college team at St. Thomas, and so we reserved the theater opening weekend to take our hockey team to see this movie, and I got to tell you, Bill, I was blown away. I mean, I honestly, I mean this sincerely as a quote unquote self-proclaimed movie guru. They hit all the notes in my eyes with the way they put that movie together. I want to know the build-up for you when you heard that they were making the movie, and when you found out that they were using actual hockey players, and Herbie was involved as an advisor, and then when you finally saw the movie, what you thought.
yeah. I thought it was good. They brought us out for that premiere,
Mm-hmm.
and it was good. I thought, yeah, I thought they did a nice job. I mean, kind of, a friendly movie, and I thought it was good. But it's funny, as time went on, it seems like it's gotten even better. I mean, and
Yes,
I'm not sure if it's kind of the way movies are made now versus that one, but it just seems like it's kind of stood the test of time, and it's
it
yeah, it's still
has.
it's still a feel good. Yeah, it's still a feel good story.
Yeah, it is, and I think what it's done, and I think it's allowed people here in the last 15, 20 years that maybe weren't alive at that time, that have probably only read about this or seen highlights in different various spots, to go back and relive the excitement of it. The movie captured where the country was at that time and why this was such a big deal beyond hockey, and the groundswell of support as it went on, and the emotion and all that good stuff. And it also captured the personality of your head coach, who was, Herb Brooks was his own guy. And it
Yeah.
captured enough of that, even though it's family friendly. Like, we all were taken kind of behind the curtain there just a little bit. And like you said, I mean,
Hmm.
we'll never know what it was like to play for him, but we got a little taste of it. And it makes sense now that I look back, like watching you guys, how tight you are. It all kind of ties it together for me.
Yeah, no question. It's been just a great ride for us, and the movie certainly has really helped.
So we'll touch briefly on your pro career, because you had a couple of options. You were a good enough player that you got drafted by both Montreal and the NHL, and a couple of years before that, you got drafted by the New England Whalers in the old WHA, which included the Fighting Saints for a while in St. Paul. Was there a decision for you, Bill, or were you just like, once the NHL drafted you, and especially the Montreal Canadiens, you're not even going to think about it at that point?
Back then, it wasn't like the one and done or whatever. It was kind of like you'd play out your college eligibility and then go mostly. It didn't seem like too many guys were leaving early, especially American kids. There wasn't very many in the league, and it was a tough thing to break into at the time. And so I don't think there wasn't a big decision to make. I knew I was going to, I'd always been a pretty good student, so I was going to stay in school and then and see what happened. So for me, there really wasn't a big decision whether I was going to turn pro or not. I'd hoped at some point I could play for a little bit, and I knew that wasn't going to probably be my lifelong profession, but I was going to try to give it a whirl, and so that's what happened.
It's funny because I talk to kids today that are in the National Hockey League, and they all know and respect the impact of 1980 and what that had on the way the National Hockey League looks at American-born college players. And so you'll always know that you guys had such a huge impact on the league and how that changed. And you were at the front end of that, as you mentioned. Back then, you couldn't assume anything as a college player playing in the National Hockey League. That was a much smaller percentage back then. It's changed dramatically. And I think the pivot point, most would agree, would be 1980.
Yeah, right around that time, no question.
It's amazing.
Yep.
And you hinted at this in our earlier part of the conversation with asking Herb if you were going to be on the Olympic team or not, or you had to go to dental school. You end up being an oral surgeon, and I find that to be fascinating as well. Did you always have that in the back of your mind as a young, really good hockey player? Because I look at most kids that grow up playing hockey at a high level and end up playing like you did for or national champions and Olympic gold medalists that you wouldn't even be thinking about that. But clearly, this was a big part of at some point, your educational process.
Yeah, I guess I did. I'd seen a lot of guys get cut and a lot of guys lose, teeth, break their jaws or whatever. And I thought, I wouldn't mind being the guy who fixes those guys up. I thought it was the oral surgeons. I didn't realize that there was turf battles between ear, nose, and throat, plastics, and oral maxillofacial, but it wouldn't really matter. But so I knew that I kind of wanted to go into oral and maxillofacial surgery, and that's what I did. I thought I would like to the trauma part of it, and then also to treat like some of the congenital deformities the dentofacial deformities that we would treat to move their jaws wherever they needed to go so they could get back to a normal bite again, and so it was good, and I really enjoyed it. It was a fun career. I enjoyed the surgery part of it. I enjoyed that. It was kind of like being in the locker room, right before going on the ice. I always said, right before you have a big case, one of my, these big cases, before you go into the operating room, you just had that little bit of nerves. You want this to go really well. It's a little different kind of nerves. You don't have to go out there and hit anybody or to get into the game. You got to just go. But you want it to go good because these kids have gone through all this preparation to get ready for surgery, and you wanted it to come out just right, and you wanted them to be really happy with it. And I think, that was the gratifying part.
That's incredible that you grew up playing hockey and in an era where, let's be honest, playing in the 70s, 80s, and in that era, there wasn't a lot of facial protection. And so
None.
Guys were losing teeth all the time, right? That was kind of the thing back then. You were losing teeth, and then you end up being an oral surgeon. That is pretty fascinating that it came full circle.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a great profession for me. I enjoyed it.
All right, we've come to the final segment. It's the Hat Trick Hot Seat. I've got 3 quick questions for you, Bill, to close the show. And there's no wrong answer. This is just from the heart. And it gives us and our listeners a chance to kind of get to know a little more about you. My first question would be, an NHL player as a youngster that you idolized, maybe the first NHL player that you thought, God, I'd like to be just like that guy. Who was that player for you?
Oh, hands down, Bobby Orr.
I knew it.
It was.
I thought so.
Oh yeah.
I thought so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No question. And I got to meet him. We did a benefit game against the Bruins alumni out in Boston, and I got to tell you, he came in the locker room.
Wow.
Yeah, it was unreal. He came in. He came in and he sat down, and it was just like the place just went quiet. It was unreal. He sat down next to me. We just started talking like any other guy. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me, It was pretty neat.
Well, if there was a Mount Rushmore of all-time great hockey players, I don't care who you talk to, he's on it. Like that guy is on it. And the fact that you got to meet him, I couldn't even imagine. I mean, that is spectacular. That is really cool. All right, question number 2 is just your all-time favorite vacation spot. When you wanted to get away and just check out from the stress of being a hockey player or an oral surgeon, what's that vacation spot for you?
2 places. Either my place out in South Dakota where I hunt and pheasant hunt and deer hunt, waterfowl out there, or up at my place on Lake of the Woods. I go up there and catch a few walleyes. That's kind of my getaway spots.
Can't go wrong with either one of those. And I figured it was somewhere quiet where it wasn't hectic, where you could just kind of be with nature, and both those spots provide that. All right, final one. This will be a fun one. Your very first concert. I want to know the venue, where the concert was, and who you went to see for that first concert.
It's funny. I think the first actual concert that I went to, I went with Donnie Micheletti, and maybe TJ Gorence, and that we saw Santana out at the Met, the old Met, the hockey rink Met.
Yep.
And I'll never forget it, because, and I was like a freshman or something, or a sophomore in college. But that was my first one that I can remember.
Great pick. My first concert was also at the Met Center, so we have that in common. And it was a very underrated place to go see great music. It was obviously 15,000 people, but the acoustics in there were actually really good. And then the sightlines. I remember vividly how good the sightlines were at the old Met Center. So Santana, that had to be pretty cool. Billy, thank you again. Every time I've had a chance to work with you, you've been so good to me and you and your teammates. As I mentioned at the start of the show, you guys are some of my hockey heroes. And 1980 to me is it's a sacred year. And that event will always be my very favorite. So to have you kind of take us through some of the emotions of that and Herbie and all the good stuff today, I couldn't have asked for anything more. Thank you for doing this.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for all you do for the hockey around Minnesota.
What a good man. Bill Baker, guys. We'll be back after a quick break to close this episode of Wooden Sticks. Well, that was fun. That was really cool to get to hear from Bill Baker today and kind of take us back in time. And that's the beauty of podcast format. You know, so many of the things I've worked with Billy Baker and a lot of the Olympic guys are in front of a big audience and on a stage, and maybe it's an intermission interview on our broadcast, but this was just 45 minutes of just fun, goodness, going back and taking a trip back to Grand Rapids and, you know, feeling what that was like to play in the early 70s in that community and the rivalry with Greenway and the recruiting process. I remember I didn't get nearly the letters he got, but I got a couple of letters once in a while. As you were a kid, you'd run to the mailbox and you'd peel out the stack of bills and everything that your mom and dad would take care of. And you'd look for any college that was sniffing around. For Bill Baker, probably a stack of colleges. And he mentioned the big gold M and that crest on that envelope and what it meant to him. And what a fateful decision that was for Billy Baker to go down and to play for Herbie and to win a couple of national championships in 76 when they beat Michigan Tech at the old Denver Arena. And then one of my favorites, 1979, we didn't talk nearly enough about this, but at the old Olympia in Detroit where the Red Wings played, just a classic old building. You talk about one of the great rivalries still in college hockey, Minnesota, North Dakota, the iconic goal by Neil Broughton diving and poking that puck into the net. Yeah, it still brings chills when I see the highlights of that. So really cool to have that conversation with Bill, but specifically to go back to 1980 and to take us through that journey leading up to the Olympics, the exhibition loss at Madison Square Garden, and then eventually beating the Russians. I was crunching the numbers this morning, and back then you had to play 5 games in the prelims to qualify, and you played 5 different teams. So there was obviously 12 teams. It was a round robin. And then the top 2 on each side of the bracket got to play in the final 4. Well, the U.S. had a really good run. They won against the Czechs 7-3. They beat Romania 7-2. They were scoring goals in bunches. The U.S. scored 25 goals in their 5 games during the prelims. The Russians scored 51. That just tells you just how dramatic and how unbelievably talented and tough to beat that team was. To average, this is averaging over 10 goals a game in the prelims for the U.S. to beat them 4-3 and then to come back and rally from down 2-1 to beat the Finns on that fateful Sunday. I'll never forget that either because, you know, the game on that Friday, the 22nd, back in 1980, I was turning 13 that week, and I had a pizza party at my house on that Friday night. All the hockey players were coming over, and people forget that the game wasn't on live TV during the day. It was a late afternoon game that was on tape delay on ABC, and they put it in prime time. And back then, in 1980, prime time was 8 o'clock at night. That's when the game aired. And so my buddies were coming over somewhere around that 6:30 time frame, and we were getting Shakey's Pizza. We were going to play knee hockey, and we were going to watch the game against the Russians. But I was so hockey crazed, and I had followed this team through every game along the way, that I had WCCO radio on that afternoon. It was a 4 o'clock start in the Twin Cities, and my parents were laughing, and my dad's like, I don't know why you're wasting your time. They have no chance of winning the game. Well, then when they eventually pull it off, and I'm running around the house going crazy, and that game gets over just before my buddies are coming over to the house, my parents sat me down and said, listen, you can't spoil this for your friends. You've got to let them live through this in its entirety without knowing what happens. And so they gave me a stern lecture, and none of my buddies had figured out that it was on the radio. And so they got over, and I don't know, I have a terrible poker face. Anybody that knows me knows this, but I somehow got through it. even at age 13, because I wanted to kind of see my buddies watching the game. And so we played knee hockey. We had our pizza at 8 o'clock. We gathered in our living room in Burnsville, Minnesota, and watched the greatest sporting event of our lives. So now that Sunday, we went to church every single Sunday morning at St. John the Baptist in Savage. And so we went to church. That day we went to the 8 o'clock mass. Billy mentioned it was 11 o'clock start on the East Coast, 10 o'clock start here. So we had our little breakfast, and then we watched the game. And we were scared to death when it was 2-1 Finland after 2 periods. And they found a way to come back and win that game, and the rest is history. So we get to relive some of that history today, and that's what makes this podcast, for me, selfishly, so much fun. So thank you, Bill Baker, one last time for doing that. I had so much fun today listening to those stories. I hope you enjoyed it as well, and I hope you'll come back with us next week for another edition of Wooden Sticks right here on the Talk North Podcast Network.